In this episode, we talk about brandy. What is brandy? Brandy began to be distilled in France circa 1313 as a medicine and was considered as possessing such marvelous strengthening and sanitary powers that physicians named it the water of life, l'eau de vie. George Washington began commercial distilling in 1797 at the urging of his Scottish farm manager, James Anderson. A few years earlier, Laird's America had opened, making it the oldest apple brandy producer, and began distilling Applejack brandy in 1780. The clear fruit brandies are traditionally unaged to maintain the wonderful intensity of the fruit, usually bottled at around 80 proof or higher. In Normandy, the spiritual home of apple brandy, diners are revived with a bracing shot of Calvados at mid-meal. In theory, this creates a trough or hole in the stomach, making room for the courses to follow. Thanks to the Brandy Bar for providing this information. Cheers! Hello, ladies and gentlemen, craft spirit enthusiasts, and those interested in the intoxicating world of craft distilleries, cideries, meaderies, wineries, and the occasional foray into breweries. It's Rich Shane, and welcome to Fermented Adventure, the podcast, where we bring you the fascinating people that are making the mash, fermenting, distilling, bottling, pouring, and delivering to you some of the finest libations in the world. Before we get started, here are a few housekeeping items. Thank you for bringing the podcast into wherever you are, and whatever you're doing, we truly are grateful that you have chosen to listen and make us part of your day. It would mean the world to us if you left a 5-star review. This helps us climb in the rankings, and it makes it easier for others to find us. Don't hesitate to leave us your comments as well. If the podcast didn't meet your expectations, tell us why. We're always striving to improve. You can find us at fermentedadventure.com. We are on Instagram and Facebook as Fermented Adventure. Email us at fermentedadventure@gmail.com. All right, FA Nation, let's meet our guests. She's Caitlin Bartlemay. I'm Rich Shane. This is Fermented Adventure, the podcast. Caitlin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Rich, for having me. I'm really looking forward to the conversation we're going to have.
I should have said Master Distiller Caitlin Bartlemay, and I didn't, so apologies to that.
And no worries, it's a new title.
Creek Distillers. How did all that get started?
Well, Clear Creek Distillery was founded in 1985 by a man named Steve McCarthy, with the whole idea behind the distillery is using the bounty of the Pacific Northwest, all the wonderful fruit that grows here, and turning it into beautiful fruit brandies and liqueurs that would rival their European counterparts. Steve had fallen in love with pear brandy while traveling through Europe, and with having difficulties finding it here in the States, he decided, well, it can't be that hard to learn how to make pear brandy. And in so doing, decided to open the third craft distillery in the country. Now, next year, we'll be celebrating our 40-year anniversary as a brand. And we continue to process over 1 million pounds of Pacific Northwest fruit into fruit brandies and liqueurs. We also produce McCarthy's Oregon single malt, which is an American single malt, that is the first American single malt released to consumers post-prohibition. So there's a lot of really cool things that we do, a lot of groundbreaking that Steve McCarthy and the Clear Creek Distillery brand have done over the history of craft distilling in the last, 50 years. And it's an honor and a pleasure to continue to represent all of Steve's goals, ambitions, and creativity, whilst also opening ourselves up to the potential of new flavors, aromas, and expressions within those creative sandboxes.
Okay, 40 years of craft distilling when there was really nobody on the landscape. When do you come on board and put your stamp on what's happening at the distillery?
Well, as Steve McCarthy was wont to put it, and bless him, I love him so much that I can't hardly, I will caveat it, but I will tell his version of the story, because that's what love really is honoring people's stories. He would say that I didn't give him an opportunity to not hire him. Bless him. I would say I was very steadfast, and they never told me to stop calling. So I would call every Friday after I had sent them a resume my last term at Oregon State. And sometimes they weren't there. Sometimes Steve would answer and I would be like, oh, is there anything? Do you have any questions for me? Do you need anything? And he'd be like, oh, well, I actually lost your resume. Could you resend it? Oh, absolutely. I'd be happy to resend it to you, sir. And over the course of my final term at Oregon State, they finally asked me up to Portland for an interview. And I was hired the day after my last final in 2010. So I've been working for Clear Creek Distillery for 14 years as of last month. So I've been kicking around craft distilling for a chunk of time now.
What was it about this experience that you said, this is my vision, this is my path, this is what I'm going for, and I'm just going to continue to say, hey, it's Caitlin, got any jobs for me? What's going on?
Well, it's so funny. I feel like everybody, general consumers, everybody's gotten really used to really fast the amount of transparency all of these brands, all of these liquids have with the general consumer. In fact, a lot of times the expectation is that all the details will even be down to the nitty gritty on the label, right? The fact that you can pick up a bottle of whiskey on the liquor store shelf and see the breakdown of the mash bill and maybe also the breakdown of the ages and types of barrels that went into the blend of that whiskey on the label, that is a very new phenomenon within the spirits category. That kind of transparency didn't start happening until very recently. So when I was going to school I graduated from high school in 2006. So from 2006 to 2010, that transparency didn't exist on any level. When I first got interested in distilling, I'm a millennial, fired up Google and started looking for information. And there really wasn't any information to be found. You could get brand pages, but there weren't, consumer Discord groups that of spirits enthusiasts from around the world talking about all the different things and recounting their stories of distillery tours and the information that they were able to glean from those tours and being able to share it with fellow enthusiasts. There was none of that. In fact, it seemed like it was difficult to even find any books referenced or papers referenced on distilling that were just easily searchable on Google. And so with my being excited to learn more, the only option was either A, travel to Scotland and go to school in Scotland, or B, get a job at a distillery, because I feel like even to this day, a great portion of those of us working in it or people that will eventually work in it, it's still very much kind of an old school apprenticeship approach to how you learn. You get a job at the distillery. Some of us, some people start in the tasting room and then they keep asking questions and they keep bugging the production team. And before they know it, they're fermenting and distilling and blending and talking about their experience. For me, I sent a cold call resume to every distillery in the greater Pacific Northwest. And that was 12 distilleries at the time in 2010. And Clear Creek never told me to stop calling. That same geographical region has over 200 distilleries in it right now in that short 14 years. So and in that 14 years, the wealth of information that one can get across all facets of social media, across brand pages and consumer groups is overwhelming. You could, if you were dedicated, you could probably nearly get a bachelor's degree in distilling sciences without ever actually enrolling in a school for the wealth of information that's currently available on it.
You spoke about high school and firing up Google. I thought you were going to say you were firing up your home still, actually. But you spoke about high school and knowing that you just had a fascination, a passion for spirits. Was there something else that led to that connection? Is it a family connection or just trying some different things? But that's pretty different than somebody saying, I've been drinking Jack Daniels with my friends in the woods versus where you said, I want to work at a distillery.
Well, I actually wasn't specifically interested in spirits until my, junior year of college, I believe. I took a class called Introduction to Beer, Wine, and Spirits as a part of my food science degree. But I was already going to school to be a food scientist. So that I would say that the spark of being both excited in food science and then specifically fermented stuff, really between my dad, fermenting things in the basement as dads are wont to do. He started with fruit wines. I think he made a strawberry rhubarb wine and a raspberry wine. It was very, very fruit forward, very few grapes. It was a couple years into his hobby that he started buying grapes. And I would go to school with stained hands for having spent the entire weekend crushing grapes with my hands in the basement with Dad. And so between that and the dawn of Food Network and Alton Brown and his wonderful show, Good Eats, that was kind of all it took. I knew I was always good at math and science. I knew, some sort of engineering or science-based, I don't know. And my parents told me that I had to go to college. They didn't care what they probably cared a little bit what I studied there, but they mostly didn't care what I studied there, but I just had to go. And lucky for me, Oregon State has a world-class and well-regarded food science program. So I was going to go in the food science program and ended up in the fermentation sciences specialty. And then as a part of the classes that you need to take in order to finish that degree program, Intro to Beer, Wine, and Spirits. And I was pretty well versed with winemaking at that point in time, having been helping my dad make wine at our winery throughout middle school and high school. And through that winery, having the opportunity to meet really amazing people within the wine industry here in Oregon. I feel like there's probably not a whole lot of people that can say they did their senior project on winemaking. And as a part of the research for their senior project in high school, got to spend the day with Roland Sauls, the head winemaker at Argyle Winery. And through both the winery and a family connection, I got to do a crush day at Argyle Winery as a high schooler on a Saturday, and it was totally awesome. They really rolled out the red carpet and gave me an opportunity to pretty much see all the facets of a huge brand name and with a long history here in Oregon of winemaking in a day as an 18-year-old kid. So a lot of really lucky chances to get really excited about what I was doing while I moved through my degree program and learning about food science and fermented beverages.
Pardon the interruption. Thank you so much for listening to Fermented Adventure, the podcast. Could you do us a favor? Hit that follow button. It makes it easier for others to find us, and it helps us climb in the rankings. Take a screenshot of the podcast, post it, tag us, and let everyone know that you listen to the Fermented Adventure podcast. Now, back to our podcast. Caitlin, what resonates with me when I hear about your story is, and I've said this before, I think that if these things were available to me going through high school, and I graduated with a food service degree and, in the culinary arts world as well, but that was more just behind the scenes in the kitchen or in front of the house. But I think if some of these classes and this education was available, I get a sense that that would have been a direction I might have gone, given my fascination with the spirits, wine, ciders, and all that. You had some great mentors that have really come into your life. Who's mentoring you now?
I am absolutely spoiled by mentors. I am my predecessor, Joseph O'Sullivan. He's the current master distiller at Minden Mills down in Nevada. He is I know he's going to, if he listens to this, he's going to absolutely hate my saying this, but he is definitely the reason that I have the confidence and the knowledge and the experience, but mainly also the confidence to be where I'm at today. We started working together when he was hired by Hood River Distillers in 2017 to move the distillery from Portland to Hood River. And I was very quiet, very head down, get my job done. I'd like to think that I'm still very dependable, but I was a show up a half an hour early and stay until the job's done, steady, excited, and wanted to learn more employee. And he really took me by the hand and was very generous with his time and sharing literally everything. We did everything together, and he didn't have to do that. He didn't have to bring me on podcasts. He didn't have to, have me holding on to his coattails when we went to consumer events, and he didn't have to start, sharing some of the travel opportunities that we have to go and spend time in market, but he did. And so that mentorship has been huge for me on a personal level, but also for my career as well. But alongside Joseph, both Joseph and my former boss, Donna Goodrow, she was the former VP of operations for Hood River Distillers. We are still in close contact. We talk off and on, we text, all that kind of stuff. And I just had, beers last night with the former president and CEO of Hood River Distillers as well. So, and those are just people that I have been fortunate enough to work with, let alone the gift of all the friendships that I have found across the industry. So there are so many people to look up to and to grow with and alongside within this industry. It really is a huge family. And you get that sense, when you go to the American Craft Spirits Association conference that we have every year, it feels like coming home. There's no brands, there's no like my whiskey or your whiskey. It's everybody's whiskey, and it's all of us working together. And so as a community, the distilling world is super supportive of pretty much everybody within it. So very lucky.
I love the origin story and how you've arrived to where you are now and the predecessors and people that have taken you along the way. What was that like for you? You sent in all those resumes, made calls, and you finally got to be inside the distillery and be there a little bit farther along where you're actually the one that's now responsible for producing everything that's going into bottles. What was that experience like for you?
Just a lot of early mornings and late nights and weekends and hard work and really just, finding the excitement and rejoicing in the shared passion for the brand and for what we do. That's really, sometimes we're in the middle of cherry season, which is my least favorite season of the year. I refer to it sometimes as just cherry trauma. I've been traumatized by cherries. And so as cherry season gets closer and closer, Bartlemay experiences some cherry trauma. But it's just there's always something more to learn. I've 14 years I've made it to master distiller, and yet I still learn things all the time on a daily basis. I listen to your podcast and learn things. I listen to other podcasts and I learn things. I speak to friends in the within the industry, and it's all these little details and all of these changes and creative choices that we all make, and the global history of how we've gotten here and how these brands and these liquids have made their way around the world and have grown into where we are, well over 2,000 craft distilleries across the United States. There's always something to learn. There's always something new to try. And there's always something that gives you the opportunity to be creative and analytical. And that's one of the cool parts of the job.
You are such an ambassador for the industry, a voice for craft distilling and craft spirits. What were some of those aha moments for you that you said, you know what, all the things that I planned out or dreamed of for myself, I'm on the right path?
Well, I think the word plan is definitely a bit excessive. I don't think really at any point in time in my career until incredibly recently did I think that master distiller was potentially something that would ever be behind my name. You come into work and you do your best and you leave it all on the floor and you keep learning. I guess that's there was definitely no plan to get to master distiller. I got so sidetracked on saying there wasn't a plan. I actually forgot your original question. Would you remind me what you asked?
Well, no, just, there's experiences we have in life.
Oh, right. Aha experiences. I remember. Yeah. It's a good thing you edit this. That's what I needed, to aha experiences.
No, that's still good because I like what you said there. It was really important just in your thought process.
Yeah. And as far as aha experiences go, I think I just am a passionate person. I don't feel like I'm putting on a hat when I talk about all of our brands, but it seems as though every time I lead a tour of the distillery. Even way back in the day, we used to do these really wonderful open houses at the distillery in Portland, and because a lot of people travel for Thanksgiving, and Portland is certainly a travel destination when the distillery was still in Portland. And we would do these really awesome open houses, and we would be open Friday and Saturday after Thanksgiving. So you've had your meal, maybe you've done your Black Friday stuff. What are we going to do in Portland now? And thankfully, a lot of businesses are closed so that everybody can enjoy time with their family and friends during that time of year. But also sometimes businesses will go out of their way to make sure there's something fun to do as well. And that was something that Clear Creek chose to do. And so I had probably only worked for the distillery. I mean, I started in June. But from June to November, and then I think I listened to a couple members of our team back then give like 2 tours on the first day. And then they're like, all right, Kate, it's your turn. And for whatever reason, my innate passion for anything that I do, and it comes across immediately. So from all the way back then until now, I hear one comment that kind of resonates and gets repeated no matter what I'm doing, whether it's a podcast or a tasting event or a tour, or even just talking to a random stranger on the elevator. They all seem enamored and enthralled by the passion that I exude for the work that I do. And I think I'm very fortunate that comes really easily to me. It's easy to be excited to share Clear Creek Distillery, to share Steve's legacy, to share the values that this company have for all of the things that we make, that we continue to make, and also for the team members that make this all possible. So those are the aha moments are when I get this big hit of confidence when I do a tasting event or a podcast, and I'm like, oh wow, yeah, I actually do know a thing or two about what I'm doing, and then I just try to ride that wave until the next opportunity that I have.
It's easy day to day to get caught up in the minutia of things and just go through the steps, because in a lot of ways it's cleaning, it's steps, it's very exact as a science.
It's cleaning and paperwork.
Yeah. And so your passion, your enthusiasm is still there. It's still at a high level. And I think that's just who you are. And the fact is that you are fueled by what you do day to day and being able to share that. And we have 3 bottles here. Clear Creek Distillery. You sent this bottle of pear brandy. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh wow! I don't know if this is where we're going to start, but one of the things I wanted to ask,
nailed it.
All right, good. One of the things I wanted to ask you is, you said Clear Creek Distillery, and you said Hood River, and
correct.
Is the connection? How does this all work?
Absolutely. I have a story. Did you actually wait for the podcast to try it for the first time?
This is the first time this bottle stopper's been off. Yes. No, I don't. I definitely, I want that experience the first time. I want to meet with Caitlin, and I want her to take me through the tour. I don't want to sit in my office here and have my own little tour all by myself. So.
No, that's awesome.
Wow. I pulled the top on this. Holy cow. I feel like there's this wonderful pear explosion.
Yeah, people sometimes ask us for tasting notes on the pear brandy, and of all the things that we make, I mean, many of the fruit brandies, it's difficult, but for the most so, I think, for the pear and raspberry, because it's just, the pear brandy smells like pears. It tastes like pears. It's made from a whole fruit fermentation of Bartlett pears. It takes over 20 pounds, or about 20 pounds, to make that bottle that you're holding in your hand, one 700 milliliter bottle. It takes 20 pounds of ripe Bartlett pears from the Hood River Valley to make that single bottle. The tasting notes are pear. It's unavoidable. All we do, it's a whole fruit fermentation. All we do is add yeast and take good care of it. That's it.
I feel like I was there during just crushing day or stomping day or puree day. What is it? What's when you take the pears?
It's crush day for sure. Okay. And those pears are ripened in house. So Bartlett pears don't actually ripen on trees. They're picked when they're green for many reasons. The easiest reason is that they're way easy to ship and share around the world if they're like sturdy green pear-shaped pieces of wood, because Bartlett pears are so fragile when they are perfectly ripe. you can touch it and 20 minutes later come back and you can see that your fingerprint is oxidized in the peel of that pear. So if you can imagine, like, it would be difficult to transport that pear from the orchard to 3 blocks down to a farm stand and have that pear be something that would be appealing to one's eye for the oxidation that would appear just from the handling of a single person hand picking a pear and setting it down on a counter at a farm stand. So for reasons of shareability and transportation, they're picked underripe. But from a nerdy perspective, pears, if allowed to ripen on the tree or just allowed to ripen of their own accord, would ripen anywhere from 10 to like 16 days. And each pear would continue to live its own unique pear life as a part of its journey to becoming a sweet, beautiful Bartlett pear. But that is really difficult when you're trying to crush 100% all perfectly ripe Bartlett pears so that you get this wonderful, brilliant and sweet kind of aroma on the nose. And even though there's no sugar in the brandy, it's 80 proof and bone dry. When you take a sip of it, it is as if you're taking a bite of a very sweet, juicy, perfectly ripe Bartlett pear. Now, if you pick those pears and put them in cold storage, it changes the gene expression on the messages that get sent within the pear on how it should ripen. So instead of ripening from between 10 and 16 days, whenever it chooses, on each individual pear basis, no matter if the pear is large or small, perfectly shaped or weird shaped, all of those pears will ripen in about 7 days if you put them in cold storage for at least 2 weeks, which is super convenient for brandy distillers, but also convenient to anybody that is, trying to ship pears around the world. If you keep them cold, you start to warm them up, you start the timer between 6 and 7.5 days. Those pears are going to be absolutely perfect, sweet, and delicious.
The nose on this is, I get the flesh of the pear, I get the skin, I get the seeds, I get the stems. Sometimes I've tried a brandy, and if you blindfolded me, sometimes, is it an apple brandy? Is it a pear brandy? The nose just does not distinguish what it is. I could nose this all day, and the area that I'm in, it's almost as if, you sprayed air freshener, pear air freshener. This is amazing. How I've had other pear brandies, and like I said, I don't get that nose. That is this just something indigenous to the location, the terroir, the provenance? Is it your water? Is it the technique of distilling? Because you talked about how you have these pears and you ripen them. Mm-hmm. But you've got to treat these pears with the respect that you've just produced to make this pear brandy.
Yep. I think it's a combination of a lot of things. It certainly, we have access to absolutely beautiful fruit here grown literally all around us here in the Hood River Valley. We also have, been building on nearly 40 years of experience in making pear brandy. And that definitely is not something to turn your nose up at. But we also have really beautiful Arnold Holstein pot stills. They're all 60-gallon pot stills. And through the distillation process, they have an incredible amount of copper contact that the brandy and the vapor from that brandy goes through. And copper actually reacts out sulfur components. So as those stills get worn in and they dig some, pits and rivulets throughout the copper, that copper contact expands exponentially. So when they were brand new, there was less copper contact than there is now that they're worn in. And I think that does change the characteristics that you're likely to get out of that pear brandy, right? You're able to truly access all the beautiful fruit and floral notes that those pears had to offer us without being distracted by any sulfur components from the distillation process itself. We also take incredibly narrow cuts. Every head's cut, every tail's cut is done by an actual, real smelling and tasting human. And I think that level of attention and detail translates to the quality in all of our products.
So your cuts aren't being taken by AI yet?
No cuts by AI yet. No, we're not automated. I'm not automated at all. I do owe you an answer, by the way. You asked me a question. And I haven't actually answered it because we got distracted by the pear brandy, which happens to the best of us.
I am not only distracted by this pear brandy, I am falling in love with this pear brandy by far. And what frustrates me, I guess, is my previous pear brandy experience to sometimes I kind of, you talk about, putting up your nose or, I almost like, yeah, another brandy. And I just really have no interest because it has no character. It has no flavor. It's somebody thought that they needed to make a brandy and it's pear or it's apple or it's something. And it's almost like you took a neutral grain spirit and maybe added some artificial flavoring to it. And it just tasted like nothing. And this is like, I'm getting my full daily vitamins and minerals because I'm eating these pears and I want to have more. This is delicious.
Well, lucky for you, we make several clear fruit spirits. So we make a Kirschwasser, which is cherry brandy, and then a blue plum brandy, as well as apple brandies that are aged for either 2 or 8 years in French oak, the Old Delicious, which we have the opportunity to try today if you'd like. I did send that bottle. So we have many of the brandies, but it's interesting that you bring up your inclination and natural reaction to the brandy category. It's still astounding to me that even though Prohibition only lasted 13 years, it's an incredible amount of our drinking and alcohol culture that Americans have lost. And in reinventing it, there are a lot of things that have been reinvented for better, and there are a lot of things that have been completely ignored and reinvented for the worse. And brandy is one of the things that really got kind of put by the wayside, misconstrued, and forgotten by your average American consumer. A lot of people, their first gut reaction to the word brandy are going to assume it's going to be, aged. It's going to be probably a little sweet, taste like the inside of grandma's handbag. Not their deal. They're going to move on. They're a bourbon drinker. They're a rye drinker. They're a vodka drinker. The word brandy is scary unless you're from Michigan or Wisconsin, in which case it's totally normal. But the first distillations by colonists here in the state were fruit brandies. Apple and peach brandies were more common than were the spirits really of the colonists until the sugar trade and the rum trade. And it was 150 years after the first fruit brandy distillation by colonists that bourbon was discovered. So not only does the distillation history of the United States rely heavily on brandy, but also when you talk about the European history of spirits distillation, brandy is incredibly important to all of those cultures. In fact, when we talk about the blue plum brandy, that's one of many brandies where so many countries have a shared history and tradition that no country and the countries have tried, but no country has been granted sole proprietary production over that thing, because it really does belong to all the people. And like one of my favorite kind of history facts that I've unearthed about the plum is throughout like Eastern Europe and the Balkans, a centuries old saying amongst those communities is the best place to build a house is next to a plum tree. And it's specifically because, one, they grow an awful lot of plums, but out of all of those plums, you can make slivovitz, you can make that blue plum brandy. So the tradition of brandy and the celebration of brandy has really been lost to your average American consumer. And that's something that, places like Clear Creek and St. George and Germain-Robin and all the other wonderful brandy distilleries across the country, Brand in Missouri, spend the bulk of our time trying to, turn the tides and to educate American consumers about how beautiful the brandy category is and what they're really missing out on.
I hope for any listener that this conversation right now makes you excited to want to try this brandy for sure, or give other brandies a chance. Your connection to history and the emergence of this country and the connection to farming and the fruits and what we had here, you talk about it and the loss of something, but it gives you I think it gives you a longer runway to create more of a fan appreciation to what these stand for and what really the enjoyment and drinkability can be for the consumer.
And also like the access to provenance, there's some really great brandy distilleries in New York. You talk about Tuttletown and I think it's like Clockworks or something like that up in upstate New York. And then, the Lairds have been doing this longer than anybody has. And they're using, apple varieties that are prevalent in the East Coast. They're different than the West Coast varieties. They're different than the varieties that people have access to all across the country. And so, what people are very excited to explore the provenance of American single malt whiskey. And certainly as a proud American Single Malt Whiskey Commission member, we are too. But with the brandy category, that same thing exists and has existed for a very long time. And so there's so many opportunities to celebrate and support the regionality of these brandies within wherever you happen to find yourself, as much as it is awesome to celebrate, buying a bottle of pear brandy from Clear Creek Distillery in Florida and enjoying essentially concentrated sunshine from Hood River, Oregon. There's a lot of fun to be had in that category.
All right, there you go. Hood River, Oregon. You talk about all the distilleries and the brands underneath the umbrella.
Yep.
Kind of help hone us in right now to understand what all is being produced out of your distillery.
Well done, by the way. I had made sure that I owed you an answer to that question, and you managed to bring us back around. Well done. So the way it all works. So Clear Creek Distillery, like I said earlier, founded in 1985 by Steve McCarthy. Near and around the 30th anniversary of Clear Creek, Steve had decided that he was ready to retire. He was, 70, 71 years old, and bless him, he absolutely deserved to retire. And so he started looking around for a company that would buy Clear Creek Distillery. And there are two things that were very important to him. And the most important being that whoever bought the brand would take care of the staff and the employees. We were 10 people at the time. Everything that we did was all in-house. So all the packaging, shipping, both domestic and international, accounting, paperwork, sales, you name it, everything was in one facility, one house, 10 people pulled it all off. And the other thing that he was looking for is to protect the values that he built Clear Creek Distillery with, in that it was family owned. It was made, everything that we make, the raw materials come from within 200 miles of the distillery. And so making sure that the culture and the integrity of the working within your local community of the Pacific Northwest were going to be ensured by whoever bought the company. And little did he know that Hood River Distillers at the time was actually looking to return to their roots. Hood River Distillers was founded in 1934, a few months after the repeal of Prohibition. And they were founded doing the same thing that Steve was doing, right? Making delicious fruit brandies from the bounty of the Pacific Northwest here in the Hood River Valley. During the War Department asked any active distillery to make industrial spirits for the production of explosives and rubber. And after the war, they went back to doing all their regular products, but consumer ideas and consumer tastes shifted, and people started drinking more vodka and gin, and brandy completely got forgotten. And so too, brown spirits kind of went through a lull during that period as well. And so by the mid-50s, the original founders actually sold it to 4 business-owning families here in the Hood River Valley, who still own Hood River Distillers to this day, with the Dodge family being the largest representative family of those 4 families. So they were actually in 2014 looking to return to their roots because they stopped distilling in the late 50s, early 60s and became a blending house. So they were buying bulk spirits from around the world, blending them together and creating all these new products and new brands. So when Steve approached Hood River Distillers, he had no idea that they already were trying, had blank checks in hand to start looking at buying stills, buying equipment, finding a facility, and trying to find their roots and their voice in controlling any one of their products from raw materials all the way to finished good. And so it really was perfect timing. The sale of Clear Creek Distillery to Hood River Distillers happened in February of 2014. And it happened in the best way possible, in that Steve stayed on as a consultant for a couple years. And it was really important to Hood River Distillers to learn from us. They didn't buy us to, ransack our brand, take what they wanted and leave us in the dirt. They wanted to learn from the best. They wanted to learn from Clear Creek Distillery. And so, even in those early days, they came to the entire production team and they were like, look, you guys are the best at what you do. And we're not going to come in here stomping our angry boots around telling you that you're doing it wrong and trying to teach you how to be distillers. You are our distillers. We are good at the paperwork. So we will help you support and grow you however we can, doing the more mundane tasks. And we want you to keep doing what you're doing. And we want you to make more of the same things that you've been making throughout the history of this brand. And that's, what we continue to do to this day. We've since moved to Hood River. The distillery now produces a handful of independent brands for Hood River Distillers, including Old Delicious, which is actually an independent brand, that bottle that I sent you, as well as things like Timberline vodka, which is made from 14 different varieties of Pacific Northwest apple and grain. We also are making the DeGroff Amaro and Aperitivo in partnership with Dale DeGroff and Ted Bro. And I actually forget all of the things that we make here because we're a small team of three, myself, Garrett Trotter Ramos, and Everett Rubin, and we represent a big chunk of the premium portfolio for Hood River Distillers. So yeah, that's the longer story of how the companies teamed up together and moved forward together. We make all of the Clear Creek brandies and the McCarthys that we all know and love, but we also work on independent brands for the larger company as well, all while trying to make sure that we're following the values of Clear Creek Distillery and putting them across all the brands that come out of here as best as we can.
All right. First of all, thank you so much for your time today, because if you're making all of those things, you carving out some time for us today, I really appreciate that.
Oh, no, of course. Like I said, I enjoy I would say most of my job. I can't honestly in good conscience say that I enjoy the paperwork part of the job, but having the opportunity to educate and to share the hard work of my team is really an honor. So thank you for having me on here.
All right, we're not done yet because
no, I know we're not, but I'm always
things,
sure that that this is a two-way street. I'm absolutely honored to have the opportunity to speak with you and to answer your questions.
Consumers, how many brandies can they look forward to coming from Clear Creek Distillery?
Oh gosh, a number. I should have those off the top of my dome, and I don't. I'm so used to just listing them all out. We have 7 fruit liqueurs. McCarthy's now is like 7 or 8 different SKUs between the 3-year, 6-year, Oloroso, Pedro Jimenez, and single barrels and special releases. For clear brandies, Clear Creek has pear, cherry, raspberry, blue plum. And aged brandies, we have an Oregon brandy, a 2-year, and an 8-year apple brandy.
Okay. For those that you just excited even more than they already are now to find a way to, how do people, if they're not where you are,
sure,
how do they get your spirits?
Well, we have distribution, I think, in 41 states and 7 countries. So depending on where you live, it could be really easy. But depending on where you live, it might be actually quite difficult. We also do some direct-to-consumer shipping through our website, which I think covers 36 or 38 states. I'll have to ask the marketing team to remind me how many states it covers. So between those two things, it shouldn't be too difficult to find a way to get you a bottle of our pear brandy or any number of our award-winning spirits. And then worst case scenario, you can always send a note to the Instagram pages, the Clear Creek page, Clear Creek Distillery page, Trails End, which is our Kentucky bourbon we bring from Kentucky. And then we explore the culinary history of the Pacific Northwest and do creative finishes on that bourbon. And then also the McCarthy's whiskey page. All 3 of those Instagram pages I actually run. So if you're looking for any of those products, send a note to those Instagram accounts, and I'll do my best to try to find a way to connect you with a bottle.
Caitlin, I'm shaking my head at you right now because you're upsetting me.
Sorry.
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have Dawn send our credit card to you. So each time you create something, just put something in the mail and send it to us.
Sure.
Literally, I had no idea about this whole Kentucky bourbon thing, and the experience you're giving and the way you're treating that, we're gonna do it. I don't know. We'll do another podcast. I got this Old Delicious here,
yes,
and I'm curious
That's actually
about this.
Really great. You have no idea how good of a segue that is to move to the Old Delicious when you're talking about the Trails End. We'll get into that in a second.
You know what? Let's get into this now. Old Delicious. This is a double bourbon barreled apple brandy.
Yep, nailed it. So when we talk about, I've already kind of hit on a lot of the Old Delicious points, which is, we talk about early distilling by the colonists. It was an apple brandy that was, as far as we know, the first distillate in the colonies. By a man named Cornelius Town in present-day Staten Island. And so people have this misapprehension about the real spirit of the United States. It was an act of Congress in 1964 that made the declared bourbon the spirit of the United States, even though it was 150 years after the first distillation by colonists that bourbon was discovered and started being created. And so for a long time, it was peach and apple brandies predominantly, but other grape brandies, as well as, eventually as settlers moved through Pennsylvania, and you had all your rye whiskeys that came up through Pennsylvania before they ran away from the crowds down to the south, where rye doesn't grow as well, but corn sure does. So Old Delicious is actually the first ever trademark brand by Hood River Distillers in 1934. And this was one of the first products that Clear Creek and Hood River Distillers ever worked on together. And so in our minds, it's not only a beautiful bridge between both companies and our now shared history, but also it's a bridge between what should be the spirit of the United States and what people presume it to be, which is bourbon. And again, we spend so much of our time educating people on the category of brandy. And so through this liquid, it's an opportunity for people that, they see the word bourbon, they're a bourbon drinker. There is a lot of flavors and aromas of bourbon that you get because this liquid has aged for at least 2 years in 2 subsequent ex-bourbon casks. So you get things like, barbecued, roasted corn, some of that sweetness of the corn, some fatty nuts like pecans from the barrel aging itself. But you also have these beautiful, bright floral notes from the apple, the whole apple fermented and distilled apple brandy that goes into those barrels. So it's a really great bridge for people that think that they're bourbon drinkers and only bourbon drinkers. And it's an opportunity to kind of dip your toe into the brandy world and see that it's not just, sweet grandma's handbag stuff, that there's actually a lot of nuance and a lot of places to explore the brandy world.
The nose on this has all the characteristics of bourbon that I gravitate towards. The honey notes, the brown sugar notes, the vanilla notes. It is all there, but it still has the apple. You still get the crispness of the apple on the nose. And, I just took a little bit and rubbed it in my hands, and it's like pure apple cider. It's just a wonderful experience. And I haven't even tried this. And I feel like what you're describing is we're drinking history here.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of several histories in a time capsule, and if I do say so myself, a very attractive package. I'm happy to be very proud about this because I had absolutely nothing to do with the packaging. That was the marketing team and all of their wonderful decisions. Carrie Murette is absolutely amazing, and I love this. Is, I think, probably one of my favorite packages. This bottle is really gorgeous. We also, it's while we're tasting the Old Delicious, so that's been aged, like I said, in 2 ex-bourbon casks. So it spends a year in a freshly drained bourbon cask. After a year, we pull it out of that barrel. We put it into another freshly drained bourbon barrel for a second year. So it's double bourbon barreled apple brandy. Clear Creek also has a 2-year and an 8-year-old apple brandy as well. So if you really want to explore the differences and similarities between those oak and those age representations, the things that you get from it being an ex-bourbon cask, but also a heavy charred American oak cask, are different than what you might get out of the medium toast French oak casks that the Clear Creek 2-year and 8-year apple brandies are released in. So there's a lot of fun stuff to explore between all 3 of them.
This is 85 proof.
Correct.
And I almost feel like there's an elevated sense on the proof, but then I wonder, are any of those bourbon barrels, the ex-bourbon barrels, are any of those higher rye bourbons?
So the bourbon barrels come from the Trails End line. I cannot tell you where that bourbon comes from. I can tell you it comes from Kentucky. It is Kentucky bourbon, and it's aged for the entirety of its age statement in Kentucky before coming to Oregon, where we do our finishes. The Trails End 8 is finished on toasted Oregon oak staves. The 10-year is finished in whole Oregon oak casks for a much longer time. And then we have an apple Trails End expression where that bourbon is drained and then aged in ex-apple brandy casks. The why Trails End End was always going to come up in this conversation with Old Delicious, is because it's the Trails End casks that go to finish the Old Delicious, or to age the Old Delicious, but it's the then apple casks, once the Old Delicious has come out of them, that go back to finish that bourbon for the apple brandy cask finished Trails End. So we make sure that we get as much use out of those American oak casks as possible before I resell them to other distilleries or breweries around the Pacific Northwest.
I'm going to say for me, because this is my first time having this, I'm going to call this New Delicious. Because I'm just going to call it plain delicious. I am so again, two things. I now am in love with two people at the bar, and I just don't want to I want to bring them both home, if that's okay. Mm-hmm. This has so much character. The way and I don't even know how somebody figured out to put it in one cask and then another cask, and just the time and effort it took to create the balanced flavor. Let's not lose the fact that this is an apple brandy. Mm-hmm. So for me, not ever having your apple brandy, but having the experience of your pear brandy, my expectation is already, I know I'm going to get apple where apple should be. Mm-hmm. Amazing. This is absolutely amazing. So thank you for that.
I'm so glad you like it.
Wow.
Poor Old Delicious has really suffered from timing. A lot of people don't know about it because we launched it in March of 2020.
Perfect timing.
Great timing.
So it's a COVID baby.
Absolutely amazing timing. Yeah. So it's really, but it's one of those, it's one of our favorites, one of my favorites. So it's whenever given the opportunity to share it with a new person, it features prominently on our very rare and occasional distillery tours. We talk about Old Delicious, but it was Joseph and I that the brandy ended up in the Trails End casks by serendipity. And then after the first year or so of them being in there, Joseph and I tried it and we were like, this is really good. I think we really have something here, but it needs more. And so that's how we got to the doubling, as it were. And now it's don't be a baby, double bourbon barreled apple brandy. Which actually, because distillers are weird and always nerds, the barrel book for the 3-ring binder that we keep all of our notes for the Old Delicious barrels, it's not labeled Old Delicious or double bourbon barrel apple brandy. It's labeled Jennifer Grey, and it has a picture of Jennifer Grey on the front of it because nobody puts baby in a corner. So if you were to come into this, now I'm telling it on your podcast, so everybody would know where to find the super secret Old Delicious notes. But if you were to look through one of our cupboards at all of our 3-ring binders, one of them is just labeled Jennifer Grey for no apparent reason. And
I just want to go look at your binder. I just see other names of your binders right now.
Yeah. Sure. If given the opportunity, I try to rein in my sense of humor. But if I have the opportunity to sneak in kind of like a hidden Easter egg of my sense of humor and comedy, I absolutely will.
Jennifer Grey, or anyone that knows her, if you're listening to the podcast today, find a way to get a signed bottle of this Old Delicious.
Oh my God. Oh my God. I literally just posted something today that had like a Dirty Dancing reference on the Trails End page because I took a picture of a Trails End 10 bottle on a log that had fallen across a creek around near the distillery. And as soon as I was taking the picture, all I could hear was the music from the scene where they're balancing on the log and Dirty Dancing. Like that movie, it's strange that it's a childhood movie, but that's like a childhood movie. So like if that actually happened, I might actually melt into a bottle. That would be amazing.
All right. You've thrown out the challenge. Let's see what happens in the wonderful
I would just be honored if I could send Jennifer Grey a bottle. Like that would be cool.
Just sign it, send it to Jennifer, and then have her take a picture of it. And
yeah. For sure. That would be awesome.
You will make the team and Caitlin's day, week, month. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that movie released the year that I was born as well. So it's like, a timeless classic, Dirty Dancing. You can't go wrong.
I would be remiss because, again, the barrel really comes out there and the characteristics of the barrel, it's not overdone. It's not oaky. It's just so, I'm going to use this again. It's just such a balance between the apple and the barrel and the notes of the barrel. Well done. Just tremendously well done. All right, this is the oldest America's first single malt. Is this the oldest American single malt in the country that I'm drinking now?
Well, okay, there is a slight difference. It is the first American single malt, but I believe, and I'm opening myself to ridicule and whippings from my friends in the industry, but I believe the oldest age statement release of single malt is actually the Notch, which is 888 out of Nantucket. So they released the oldest age statement American single malt, which I believe is 12. But when it comes to the first single malt to hit consumer shelves post-prohibition, that would be McCarthy's. First distilled in 1994, first released in 1998, made from 100% pea malted barley that we import from Scotland. We have a brewing partner here in town because we are more a winery than we are your average distillery, in that we are processing over 1 million pounds of Pacific Northwest fruit into brandies and liqueurs every year. So instead of also having all the equipment to be a brewery as well, we work with local brewery partners to produce that wash, our current partner being Double Mountain here in town. And then it's distilled in a single pass on our Arnold Holstein pot stills, and then aged in 100% Oregon oak casks for either 3 or 6 years for the two flagships, the two most recognizable label expressions. And I believe I sent you the 6-year.
You did.
Right.
And what I will tell those listeners that start to get turned off by the word peat, this is not that. The peat is just a light, smoky, toasty kind of a thing where you're still getting the grain of the single malt. You're still getting those characteristics. The barrel's there, and I'm at a loss for words on this one. I really am. As you're talking about, the collaboration with your brewery as well. You look at where you are when you talk about wineries and cideries and breweries and just all that whole industry where you can really draw on each other and the experience of what you do. That must be a lot of fun when you start to just have these, you're at the end of the day, you put your feet up and you're just all kind of sitting around and you're talking about what you guys do at work all day, but it's a high level. I guess my point is there's such a high level and such a high level expectation, right? That this McCarthy's, people are expecting something of a high level. And my experience already with this Old Delicious and this pear brandy, it's that bar. It's the Olympics now, right? Mm-hmm. So these are both sitting on the podium. These are all 3 medal winners, getting gold. I'm thinking, what awards have you achieved with these that we're trying today?
So you're gonna again. I'm being trained by the sales and marketing team to not be shy and humble, but you're going to laugh when I tell you that all of the awards that we've gotten, and we do appreciate and love every award that we've gotten, but in the history of Clear Creek Distillery, there is a small wooden box that they all go in. And that's, I think, why that sales and marketing team doesn't actually send them up to the distillery anymore, because they know that we're going to put them in the box. And we're happy to be so highly awarded, but I don't have a memorized list of all the awards that these brandies, that these whiskeys have garnered over. I mean, the Old Delicious we launched in 2020, but pear brandy, it's going to be 40 next year. McCarthy's, we're knocking on 26. I don't know. I'm not going to do fast math while I'm being recorded. And we have been blessed with a great many of awards from very highly respected awards programs, both nationally and internationally. So lots. But I can say, we are a very small brand, but I am never concerned about the quality of what goes in the bottle. Nothing goes in the bottle unless it's the best that we can possibly produce. And we can produce really good stuff.
I appreciate the level of humility. I really do. And I think that goes to your personality, that you want what's in the bottle to speak for itself. You're not there to be the megaphone on the mountain. It's not a brashness, but it's nice to be recognized.
Yeah.
But it's about what's in the bottle. Mm-hmm. Going back and forth on the nose of this, as you're speaking to that, you get this wonderful, fireside off in a distance smokiness, but there's such a sticky component to the nose on this. It's just wonderful on the nose, and I haven't even tried it. It's something that keeps popping in my head, and I forgot to ask you while I taste this is, what's your thing with cherries?
Oh, you're going to bring up my cherry trauma.
Yeah.
Cherries are, we're very fortunate. So, like I said, with Clear Creek Distillery, everything that we make comes from within 200 miles of the distillery. Cherries are probably second in line behind closest fruit. So the pears are literally growing all around the distillery. We're in the middle of all the pear orchards here in the Hood River Valley. Cherries come from about 20 minutes away, but what's the largest town in the gorge here in the Pacific, which is an area of the Pacific Northwest here in the Columbia River, called the Dalles. Which I actually answered for a friend recently today, the meaning behind the word Dalles. As far as I remember, it's a geological feature of this little town. There's a bunch of large canyons that all come to a head in this kind of open, flat valley where the city is located in and amongst these cliffs. And so that apparently as a geological feature is a Dalles. So it's the Dalles because it's the only one in the neighborhood. One of those fun affectations of, being a town that was a settlement along the exploration of the West and the Oregon Trail. So yeah, the cherries grow in the Dalles. It's about 20 minutes away. We're very proud to work with Orchard View Cherries. In fact, if you follow Clear Creek Distillery on the Instagram account, I posted yesterday a really great cherry tour with Brenda, who runs Orchard View Cherries. So you can actually see some of the behind the scenes on how they sort all of that fruit that comes off every year. But cherries are a very volatile crop, and they are not as predictable as we would like. Like apples happen pretty much the same time every year. Pears happen same time every year, pretty reliably. Cherries, I have to hold space in the production schedule for when they arrive, but they arrive when they arrive. Sometimes they arrive around July 4th. This year, we got them just about 2 weeks ago. I have received them as late as the first week of August. And it's like, I think it kind of makes whiskey distillers shiver in their boots when you talk about I have to make sure that I leave time and space available in my schedule at across a 6-week period to receive the only fruit that we're going to get for this product a year, because everything that Clear Creek makes is very seasonal. We only have one opportunity to make it while the fruit is good. And two, I don't know when it's going to land with, sometimes, 5 days notice. I think this year I had 2 weeks notice, but then we went through a hot period of weather and they moved it up a week. So I got a text on a Saturday afternoon from Brenda, hey, can we move cherries up a week? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. We can do that because that's how cherries work. But because it's important for the cherry brandy to be fermented and distilled on the pits of the cherry, because the cherry brandy doesn't taste just like cherries or cherry cough syrup. The predominant note and characteristic of Kirschwasser is like almonds. It's the flavor and aroma that actually comes from the pit of the cherry. And there is a beautiful kind of round flash of red fruit around that. But the reason that Kirschwasser features so prominently in baked goods and things like fondue is because of that buttery, nutty flavor from the pits themselves. And the pits are what cause the cherry trauma and the production issues, because not only are we trying to ferment whole cherries and doing punch downs, and those fermentations are during the heat of the summer, and there's lots of sugar in cherries, so you're having problems holding the yeast back and keeping a steady and healthy fermentation temperature in a building that is probably 110 degrees because it's the summertime. And you're distilling it during the heat of the summer as well. But also, as you might imagine, trying to get cherry pits out of the bottom of a tank is a difficult matter. And then also dealing with cherry pits that wander down the drain also causes some problems. So I am on a personal phone number, first name basis with the Roto-Rooter team here in the Gorge. And that's where my cherry trauma comes from.
Thank you very much for clearing all that up. I'm thinking as you're describing it, you just never know when the cherries are going to go into labor.
Yep.
So sometimes it could be premature and sometimes could be a long process.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you said this is where I selfishly geek out for me, because you've talked about yeast a couple of times on different products. Is this a proprietary yeast? You don't have to talk about it if it's a very held secret, but it seems like the yeast itself is very important to what you're producing.
People in the industry definitely always super frothy about the yeast. The yeast characteristic is always very important to focus on. We don't share the type of yeast we have. It's not a proprietary, only Clear Creek has this yeast. It's a very off-the-shelf yeast. We usually don't talk about it, but it's a hardworking yeast that does what we need it to do, but I won't actually call it out by name. How's that sound?
That sounds fine. But from as you described it, it sounded like you landed there, and it's so important to what you're producing, where it incorporates either flavor or through the fermentation process. It just seems so important that you've mentioned it a couple of times.
Absolutely is important. And I think one of the reasons it's less to do with, the strain is definitely important, don't get me wrong, but it's less to do with the strain. And the reason that I bring it up, it's important to bring it up because that's the only thing that we're adding, right?
Yep.
These are whole fruit fermentations. They're not going through any other process. It's the skins, the seeds, the stems, everything goes into a tank. We're not adding any flavors, any extra sugars, any extra aromas, no tricks. It is just what Mother Nature has created that season, and yeast.
Well, thank you for at least letting us know a little bit about that.
Sure.
All right, McCarthy's whiskey. I love the smokiness that lingers. There's such a creamy. I get almonds. I get this wonderful mint. I get the astringency here on this whiskey, and it's just a pleasurable sipping whiskey. And as you're talking, I'm thinking, you know what? I would love maybe to a little bit, because you talked about cherries. So I'm thinking a little bit of cherry bitters, or maybe crush some cherries into here and play around with that. This is such a delightful whiskey, and it's 100 proof. That drinks right spot on to me as 100 proof. It doesn't leave me burnt out, but it also leaves me wanting more. So I can play with this in a couple of different manners. Then you told me there's higher age statements. Then you tell me, I think you said Solera cask and all kinds of secondary finishes on this.
No Solera as of yet, but we do have an Oloroso and a PX.
Oloroso, I apologize.
Yeah, no worries. I didn't want to get people to listen to this and be like, oh, how did I miss a Solera? We don't have a Solera yet. That would be so cool to have one at some point in time.
There is a Fermented Adventure Solera SKU coming out. I understand it's just in the works. They haven't really produced it yet.
You're just going to go ahead and seed. You're just going to seed the future with a Fermented Adventure special barrel pick. All right, I see.
We will seed it and fund it.
No, so we have single barrels of the 3-year and the 6-year. We also have the 2 sherry cask finishes of the 6-year, the Oloroso and the Pedro Jimenez. The Oloroso sherry cask finish is the current highest rated American single malt in the history of the Whiskey Advocate. And that was also Garrett Trotter Ramos's first ever blend of McCarthy's. He was pretty brand spanking new as a distiller. And we pulled a bunch of whiskey samples and said, have at it, kid. And he absolutely knocked it out of the park.
I'm going to have to go look at that box that you sent us again, because I'm thinking there was 4 bottles in there.
Well, I didn't want to overwhelm you with too many things, so I chose 3 things that would be really great to talk about.
I bet you're an amazing cook too, aren't you, Caitlin?
Yeah. People say that to me from time to time. I do pretty commonly tell people that I am not good at anything, but the only things that I will actually throw down on and am very viciously confident about are my biscuits and my pies. So in order to be true to myself, yes, I make the hell out of biscuits and pie. And there have been years where the numbers of batches of biscuits that I have made for other people, and biscuits and gravy in particular, number nearly to the 50s or 60s. So Yes, biscuits and pies. That's my jam. But I cook with a lot of our spirits as well. I've talked on other podcasts. I make a McCarthy's pie. I've also made a pie out of our Douglas fir brand. Oh, I forgot to mention that. We also make a Douglas fir brandy for Clear Creek as well, which is kind of one of the special ones that we do. Both make great pies.
All right. First of all, next time you're anywhere near the distillery or you have one of those opportunities to take a tour, ask for Caitlin. Asked to see the Jennifer Correa binder, asked to have biscuits and gravy and pie. There's a whole new genre of things people are going to be looking for you to talk about. Caitlin, this has been such a treat. I'm grateful for your time today. Is there anything that we haven't talked about on the podcast today? Anything you want the listeners to know more about you or Clear Creek Distillery or Hood River or the several other brands that you manage and work with every day?
I would totally encourage all your listeners to go take a spin around Hood River Distillers website, because there are a number of other brands that I don't work on, but are part of the company's portfolio that are really awesome. We have a long-standing and decades-old relationship with Casa Orendine down in Jalisco, Mexico, and we're importing and bottling their misto, but we're also importing their 100% Blue Weber agave tequila, which is under the Batanga brand. So that is a Reposado and a Blanco for that brand. But there's a really a bunch of beautiful and wonderful products that span all the way from value to our premium brands. There's pretty much everything that you would possibly need within our portfolio to open a craft cocktail bar, and you'd only have to buy maybe 2 or 3 other bottles outside of what we have. So there's a lot to discover. There's a lot to find. We do have 2 tasting rooms, one here in Hood River on Oak Street. We opened another one last fall in Portland. So we realize that it's a bit of a hike. It's an hour drive from Portland to get to Hood River. It's totally worth it. It's gorgeous. And there are a lot of fun things to do here in Hood River. But we understand that it's a bit of a hike. So if you're only in only in Portland for a few hours and you're looking for something to do, we do have a tasting room downtown Portland next to the Kimpton Hotel. You'll be able to go in there and try a majority of everything that we talked about here, plus a handful of other things. It's a really good place, and I think they're open 7 days a week, noon to 6. Although the updates for that will totally be on the website. And then again, on our website and on our Instagram pages, feel free to reach out with questions. Feel free to send me those notes. I'm happy to answer them.
Caitlin, thank you so much for being with us today. Thanks for being a friend of Fermented Adventure. And we look forward to more of the great things coming out of Clear Creek Distillery, Hood River, and all of the things that you're producing every day. I will look out for the box of the biscuits and gravy too, coming our way.
Yeah, I you know what? The day that I figure out a way to ship sausage gravy across the country, you will be I can't in good conscience say first person. You'll be the second person that gets sausage gravy sent across the country. So awesome. Thank you so much for having me on. It really was a pleasure to answer all of your questions, and give me a shout if you have any more.
Thanks so much. Cheers.
Cheers.